Hi, I'm Karen Anderson. This is session 2 of our conversation on discipline and raising children. And I'm going to pass this around to everybody else. They can introduce themselves to you. Michelle, would you like to?
Yes, I'm Michelle Antonucci, and my daughter Olivia Antonucci, who's 12, is just joining us today to listen to the conversation.
My name's Abby Anderson. I'm 23 years old, and I'm Karen's daughter. I'm a graduate of Thomas More College of Liberal Arts in New Hampshire, and I'm currently doing a graduate fellowship at the Russell Kirk Center in Michigan.
Hi, I'm Anina. I'm Kathy Lund's daughter. I am 22, and I'm a recent graduate from UC Berkeley.
Hi, I'm Bridget. Oh, sorry. I'm Bridget. I'm Teresa Hirsch's daughter. She couldn't make it today, so I am representing the family. I am currently studying for my bachelor's degree at Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland.
And so I'm Kathy Lund. I'm Nina's mom. And yes, we've been here before in these discussions, and we're looking forward to have a conversation between all of us about discipline. So, Karen?
So I wonder if you guys would just like to share with us a little bit about your experiences growing up. In particular, what it was like to grow up in the type of family. Some of you guys have come from fairly large families, some from fairly small families, and some in between. What your experiences were and what sets you apart from other people. Like, did you feel like you were raised the same way as everybody else around you? Did you feel like you were raised differently? What were those differences, and how did it affect your life as dealing with other kids growing up?
I can go first unless someone else wants to go. That's a lot of questions. But one thing that I guess we can talk about or start off with is the idea of like being different from other people, I guess, and like discipline. And I think it's really interesting. A lot of times when you're little or younger, you end up thinking like, oh, wow, my mom's so strict. Like, I'm not allowed to do anything. But then as you grow, you're like, wow, my mom's so smart. Like, I didn't need to do those things, or those things were a waste of time. And then I guess just one thing that I'm really very grateful in the way that I was raised in concerning discipline, but also just concerning like comparing yourself to what other people are doing. We were raised to believe that what we did was the best, and that was what we should like always keep doing, and to not care what other people do. And so I think that was a very big part of like, I guess when it came to discipline, being okay with being a little bit like, I guess, more strict environment sometimes, but also with that, like we got more freedom earlier on. So I think it's like this wonderful balance of when they're younger, if we're like super duper strict, you're not allowed to do a lot of things, but then as you grow, you like earn that trust to be able to do a lot more. And so that was definitely my experience.
Abby, do you want to weigh in next?
Yeah, actually, a lot of what I've been thinking about kind of follows pretty directly on what Anina was saying. I felt like my transition from childhood to adulthood was very smooth, partly because of the way that my mom and dad respected us from day one and always made us a part of what was going on. They didn't like give us a ton of input on what the rules were, but they made us part of the discussion. And that meant that when I was older, it was just sort of broadening horizons. I never went from like, oh, well, when we were little kids, we could never like visit friends' houses. And now that I'm 18, I have car keys and perfect freedom. It was just very gradual. And I felt like I was treated as a person and an adult in progress from day one.
Bridget, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the use of the word freedom, Anina kind of threw in there, and then Abby also mentioned discussion. And I think growing up, looking back on that, a lot of the discipline in my house had to do with like being reasonable. Like a lot, at least the way I was raised, I was given a lot of explanation for what I did wrong, for what the right decision was. And I think that really formed me in a great way to make good decisions going forward, and have, more personal freedom because of that.
Now you were the, oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to change the question. Did you want to add something to that, Karen? Go ahead. I was gonna change the question. Go ahead.
No, change the question. I think it's good.
Okay. So my question was related to cell phones. We live. I feel like, how old were you when the smartphones came? My son was 2005. I think. I feel like we got our smartphone. So you guys are really the first generation. I think we could say that grew up with cell phones, and the biggest question, that parents talk about is, how to manage the time, how to help your children become successful with this world of technology. With the discipline you had in your home, what type of discipline worked for you, and any tips that you have for parents that worked?
I guess I can go first again. So for us, I had a flip phone first. I didn't get an iPhone until a lot later. And in order to get my flip phone, I had to win it in a sense. So I used to swim competitively. And so I had a certain goal. And if I met that goal, then I was allowed to get a phone. And that was kind of the arrangement. And actually, my sisters had the same thing. They were playing lacrosse and they had to do a certain amount of goals or something to get the cell phone. And we all started, I started out with a flip phone. My sisters had actual phones, or iPhones, I guess. But yeah, our parents were pretty, we had most freedom with the phones, but we also didn't use it that much. It was more of to call my mom or to ask her to pick me up. It was very much a practical thing. So the fact that I was swimming every day, and so I'd be dropped off, picked up, and it was practical use. And the flip phones are great because there was nothing else on it. I definitely think it's a lot harder nowadays. And I was shocked with kids. I was working at a conference, and these were fourth graders, and they had phones the size of their faces. And I was like, how do you have a phone the size of your face, and what do you have on it? You're only fourth grade. So that was, I think it's a very, very different situation. And with social media, I didn't have a Facebook, I think, till I was 16, which was a lot later than I think what kids are getting now, or they're doing Instagram and TikTok and whatnot. But so I think it's a different time, but I think also it has to be a practical use. And I do think in many ways kids need to earn it. So maybe if they're paying their own cell phone bills, they'll be a little bit more moderate on how much they do on it.
But also I think we discussed, I said discuss, I don't know, what do you think, Anina? We discussed not so much about the phone in itself, anything. It was the phone, or was visiting a friend, or going to a get together. We always saw the function of it. If it was not so much, we said what if the function was useful or not for you or for us in general, and then we utilize whatever we utilize it for what the well-being of the family and yourself, I think.
Well, I think also is teaching the kids how to manage it. So that was a big thing. I remember more specifically with Facebook, but knowing if you're gonna get nowadays with phones, you have all these technologies on it, and you need to understand how it works and how it impacts your image, and especially with later on in life, nothing is you can't hide anything anymore. And I don't know if kids realize that 10 years down the road, when they're looking for a job, something they did as a stupid 15-year-old will still be there. And it's really, really unfortunate. So I think that there needs to be a better education. And instead of maybe parents saying, no, you can't have it, more okay, if you're going to have it, you need to understand how it works, and how to use it to the best. And how can you be good with it? Instead of just focusing on yourself, maybe. But.
Does anyone else want to add to that, or what worked for them? Abby or Bridget?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in there. So I think I'm kind of in the same boat as Anina. I had, a little brick phone for ages and ages. And I remember my friends having iPhones, and they would get so annoyed because I was not answering the text because they came up as individual texts and I didn't want to open all of them. So group chats were just a mess back then. But I do think something really important that I've taken away from growing up with technology in this house is the difference between using it as a tool and using it as like a toy. So obviously like brick phones were like just tools. And then I got, you know, an iPod Touch, and that was kind of like the first time it was a toy. And my parents have used like things like cloud timers, and I'm not sure exactly the name of the software they used, but sort of putting time limits on the fun apps and that sort of thing, and very much using them as a reward system, which I think worked really well. And I was definitely like slower to get into Facebook and all that sort of thing, and I'm grateful for that, again, because you don't have as many embarrassing photos up there. Not that anything in 8th grade would have been too embarrassing, relatively speaking. But I'm grateful now. I'm actually the social media editor of my school newspaper, so I'm grateful to be able to like be comfortable with all of those platforms, to have some experience with that. So I think there is a balance, like, you know, kind of seeing the capabilities of using new technology, and it can be fun, but it can also be really great as a tool to spread information, that sort of thing. So I think that basically sums up my experience.
Abby, do you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a ton that sounds very different about mine, my experience, except for the fact that I still use a brick phone, and group texts are still, and I still don't get back to people as instantly as I should. But part of that is actually that I started out with that at 15. Didn't get a smartphone, like wasn't able to for a while, and then realized as I got older that I had kind of a tendency to get addicted to things like that. So I just stayed with the flip phone. So that was an example of like gradual rules that my parents had put in place. Like, you shouldn't have a smartphone. This is like practicality. Kind of forming me once I was supposed to be making my own decisions about it. I got a flip phone at 15. I think my older sister had the same. But I would say right now, like in our society, it would be harder to do things exactly that way. So I think most kids might have a hard time getting made fun of if they had like a flip phone. And it might be too much of an abrupt transition if a kid were to go from having a flip phone in like high school to a smartphone in college. One of my close friends was talking about how their family, they have a family smartphone, but with apps disabled. So you have text, you have calls, you have maps, all the basics. But since you still learn how to use a smartphone just without all of the fun stuff, by the time you're transitioning into having a smartphone, it's not like, oh, this is so much cooler than my old phone. I can do all of these things. And it's just like a head rush at the beginning. I'm probably a little more resistant to kids having technology than most of my little siblings are. So I'm the family old person about that. I don't think anyone should have a smartphone really. But that's like a personal thing. I don't think that should be imposed on everyone. I just think the more gradual, the better. And then you can work in tech and it's not, it doesn't like unhorse you all of a sudden.
Can I hop on that also just to ask a question? Because like one thing Abby tied on, I think it's really, really interesting to see like that mass, like at what age is it a good age for children to be exposed to like, I don't know about you guys, but for me, it's like email and like text messages and phone calls. And it's like constantly, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like sometimes I just want to throw it outside. And so I wonder with kids, I mean, I don't know how many emails kids get concerning school stuff or how it works at that age exactly, but like in many ways you have to be on your phone, because if you get an email, like I get emails about a class an hour before the class starts. And so if I don't have my phone on me, I would not be aware of that. Or like, there's just like, I mean, a lot of social media is used for networking as well. Like Twitter is really, really big in science, and like there's LinkedIn and whatnot. And so I guess I would love to ask you guys, do you guys think there's an age that it's appropriate to start like feeding these kids mass information, or like teaching them how to manage, like, because frankly, I don't think we ever were taught how to manage how do you manage your time with like email, like what's too much, what's too little. I don't think everyone found their own niche. But do you guys think for kids, is there too much information, like bombardment? And also like, that's like dopamine rushes and just like, yeah. So what do you guys think in terms of, because that's the price of the smartphone, but also is it a necessity at that age? I don't know with the school system currently.
I wouldn't put it personally, my Stephen, because sometimes I find that people get too stuck in this in itself. What I think personally, as I see how everything have developed, I think it's important to use always in history what in history has been used, which is see that your child is following those virtues that you are trying to implement in your family and in the child. Meaning, there's certain virtues and there's certain values of the family and of your child. And individually, every child is different. So you want to make sure that anything, it's good for the child and for the family. And the child has to understand as they grow up what is the best for her or for him and see the value of it. And I know technology goes really fast with us, extremely fast, it changes. But when I was in that rush and I had to make decisions, my husband and I, we thought about, for example, usage of the time. The time had to be the same value that I always had. There's hours for everything, and the phone could not interfere. Contacting your friends, I don't let friends coming into the house anytime they want because we will go crazy. So they come at certain times. So we had times for texting, times for communication. When the phone showed up, my mom, when I was a teenager, we didn't have anything about you guys, so we had the phone though. And my mom noticed as a teenager that I spent hours on the phone with my girlfriend, and I just came from school and I was sitting on the phone for hours. So my mom said, Kathy, enough, you just saw her. So I had to manage my time as a young adult. So it's managing the time, put order, and also obviously the internet. We don't throw our kids in the streets. We don't throw them in the phone. The phone is like a highway. So you don't want to put your kids in the highway because they're not ready to walk in a highway. I never had my 12 or 11-year-old driving a car because neurologically you're not ready yet. It's not my own wish. It's like you and Ina, you're studying neurology, and all of you guys, and you know how the brain works. You cannot expect that the brain of a younger, which is not developed until 21, 22, 23, 25. The neurons are ready for many things. So you have to measure the maturity of your child and know that if I don't put my child in the middle of 95 driving a car, I'm not going to put them on an iPhone to access to everything. That's more or less the same rule, I think. But I'm talking too much. So I don't know. What do you think, Bridget? If you
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think things have changed really drastically in terms of technology, even since, I was in high school. Everything is moving very quickly. So I think no matter, which one of us speaks, our experience is not going to be the same as, any of my younger siblings' experiences. It's not going to be the same as my parents' experience. I do think that the internet in general is sort of terrifying. There are so many really troubling statistics about what children are exposed to at really young ages. I think there definitely needs to be more of a shelter around younger children, especially because as your brain is developing and you're really young. I think I don't have any scientific expertise to back this up except experience and working with children myself. But I think that it's much easier to become addicted at a young age and then keep that and
that's absolutely true. It is scientific.
And so I think there is definitely that side of it. Again, I think based on what I talked about before, I might seem a little biased. Obviously, I love working with social media as a tool. So I do really enjoy that aspect of it. I think being connected to the world in that way can be a really helpful and really beautiful thing. Obviously, this thing we're doing right now is an example of that, I think. But I would definitely agree that there are, I definitely think almost in my own childhood, I wish I had been even a little bit slower to start having an iPod Touch and all that sort of thing. And I don't think it's negatively affected me in a way that that other children growing up now with iPads at age 5 will be negatively affected. But I am glad to have memories of like calling my friends on like our home phone for hours. Like I still have that memory, and I don't think that my younger siblings will, because it's just not the way people communicate. Yeah.
There's something really that you have to be aware of, that we all have to be aware of, which is, as you pointed out, it is changing so quickly that we can't even quite keep ahead of it ourselves. And the problem is that there's what we used to have in the way of highway robbers and pirates is now taking place on the internet. So there is a host of people out there of very ill will who are ready and able to use the internet to their own advantage and not to ours. Some of them actually work for companies that are quite common in our, living room terms here. But some of them are just hackers and what they call social engineers, which is a kind of a different kind of hacker. Very easy for them to get access to your kids. And the reason is because just the way social engineering works is it gets you to click on a bait, basically. And they know pretty much after, they're very, very astute at human nature. So they know if I send out 1,000 emails with this thing in it, there's like 2% of the people that will click on it. And then you have access to the computer. So there's been a couple of cases which are really unbelievably sad about what's happened. But there are a couple of cases where people have hacked into kids' computers, got access to their photographs, and then used that to blackmail the kids into doing more stuff for them. Sometimes kids as young as 8 and 9. The problem is a child will not necessarily go to a parent. And we all, with all the education and safe environment stuff in the world, a kid in a panic will panic, and they will not talk to a parent or to a trusted person. They'll go ahead and give that person who's got access to them through their computer what they want. And this can be in big ways or small. I mean, in many cases, it's not really a problem because your kid isn't doing anything that they have access to. Okay, they got access to your kid's video games. It's not a big deal. But the way that especially teens, preteens, so 10, 11, 12-year-olds are extremely, extremely sensitive to manipulation from other forces. And the internet just increases the volume, if I could use that term, of that kind of tendency to be manipulated. So they now have pressure coming at them from many different directions, not just one. It used to be it was just the kids in school pressuring you, and you could talk that over with your parents. But now it's people that you don't even know, people that you barely know, people who are all your friends of friends of friends on Snapchat or whatever, who can pressure you and then use stuff basically in print that can be used to get you. So it's not just a highway. It's kind of like an infectious disease, and it's the slower you adapt it, I think the better. But at the same time, it is, with the classes going online now, I don't know what the extent is that a kid can get away with not having anything. But you do have to realize there are people much more malicious out there, and they know how to use it to their advantage. And most of these social media formats are made to be addictive. So basically, it's like handing your kid alcohol or marijuana. It's like they are not going to be able to handle that addiction level.
It's true.
And I think that's true also. I think with boys, it's more of an issue than with girls of any kind. I think they just love the video games. They love that little adrenaline rush. I don't think that's as big a pull, but girls are much more easily manipulated socially. So I think for both, it's really important to keep that in mind, is how can this be used against you? And there are people out there who are perfectly willing to do it. And then I've seen even younger children who are not malicious, but have adopted that kind of manipulative pattern that it seems to engender this. It's the way it's set up seems to engender that kind of little, like those little cheap shots, that little, that little thing you wouldn't say in person, but you will say. So anyway, something to think about.
I think also,
go ahead,
sorry,
please.
I was gonna say, I do think the internet and like social media, there are a lot of dangers. And it's, like you're inviting people to your own home that you don't even know sometimes. But I do think and to that point, it's so important for kids to understand that, because I think a lot of times they don't. And I think it's so important for parents to understand how all the social media works, because you can't tell your kid don't do it and then not understand like what you're telling them not to do. And then also, I mean, at a certain age you can, but like when we're talking like, you know, teen years or like years that they can reason, I think it's so important to talk to your kid and be like, okay, why do you have an Instagram? Like, what's the purpose of this Instagram? And it's like, okay, like, why would you post that picture? Like, I mean, with us, so I'm one of 3 girls, and like, we'll spend, like, we're gonna post a picture, we'll talk to each other and be like, okay, like, is this good? Like, we're trying to make sure that there's nothing there that we're later gonna regret, because in reality, once it's there, and you can't take it down. And then everyone Googles your name, they'll find it. So I think to that point, it's like parents need to be educated, because the internet, the reality is like, as much as I know it's a danger, I love it so much for just studying and for education. Like, I would not have been able to get my degree without the internet. I don't know how people did it before. So I do think it's a tool that we need to really, really understand, and that parents really, really need to understand in order to like slowly feed their kids. And also it's like each parent knows their kid best, so they know when their kids are ready to. So
this is a great topic, but I wanted to, may I just redirect, Michelle, if it's okay. There's one question because of the issue of time, and we should have a discussion about the media itself. I think is a fantastic topic. I have a question that to the 3 of you, myself, is do you remember the moments when you're going through your teens where you really dislike your parents and the rules? That you can tell us, how did you deal and how did you perceive things, and how now that you're older, you look back and say, huh, or huh, or whatever. Do you know what my question is like a little bit? Do you remember that moments of a struggle of discipline, or things that your parents told you that you resented, and then you got to understand later, or you still disagree?
I mean, I feel like there wasn't, in my memory, now my siblings might say different things, but I don't feel like I had a moment of frustration or confusion, really. I always had a very strong sense that my parents and I were on the same team, and that in the long run, it was the winning team. And their rules, because they were so gradual, never there. I don't remember running up against them and feeling like it was inappropriate for my age. Like we didn't have a curfew. We were told, all right, you know what time the party ends. You have a good social sense for when things are wrapping up. I don't want you driving home when you're about to fall asleep. Just let me know if it's later than you expect and use your judgment. And we were told to use our judgment. We were told that we had good judgment, and that kind of reaffirms itself. Unless your kid obviously has terrible judgment, I think it's good to affirm him when he actually you exercise his adult judgment. Yeah, I was reflecting on it recently, and I think it was super important that we were just gradually brought into making those decisions on the ground ourselves in real time. There was nothing arbitrary about it. There's nothing really to chafe against, but there's a higher standard. So I knew that if I got into an accident driving home because I was exhausted, or didn't come home until like 3 a.m, that would be a reflection on my judgment, a reflection on my adulthood. And that's much more important than the near-term gratification of staying late at a party, or going and doing something else that keeps you out later.
How do you think you kind of said it, but how do you think your parents achieved that good criterion that you have? That, you know, it's interesting. Or you think it's your personality? You think it is? You said it's a little bit. You said it's slowly, I guess, individually introducing you to the concepts. But it seems like you have a very strong conscious and clarity and maturity about the consequences, and also I think is an appreciation of your own well-being, I think. Oh, what will you think they did right? If you will raise your kids, what is that you see that specifically when you were younger than led into where you were as a young adult?
Some of these things you might have to ask my mom too, because I'm sure she and my dad had a specific idea in their mind of what they emphasized, what they didn't. What I remember is nothing like that didn't have something to do with the situation. So nothing inflexible. I agree with maybe a basic curfew, maybe, but I don't think your kids should have to be like looking at the time and making their judgment based on that. They should know. They should know without having to consult something that doesn't matter according to the circumstance. One interesting thing is that they treated us like adults, but didn't try to be our best friend. I was thinking, like, you know, when Christ talks about his father, he never refers to his father as his best friend. He refers to him as his father. And if you have maybe too casual a relationship with your parents in that they're friends first and parents later, it detracts from the parental relationship and detracts from the expectations that you have of yourself. So I knew that I couldn't just explain like, you know what, like it was just so fun and I had a hard time tearing myself away. They wouldn't not forgive me for that, but it was more, they expected more. So I think a combination of reasonableness and flexibility with circumstances, trusting our judgment, and not trying to be something they couldn't be.
Thank you. Bridget?
Yeah, I was thinking, it sounds like you had an amazing childhood, Abby. I'm in such admiration of your parents and you as well. I definitely had moments of like clashing with my parents, and I do think that is natural on some level. I'm also like the oldest child of a lot of children, so I like to be in charge of things. So I think that is partially a personality flaw. Yeah, but looking back, I do feel a lot of the same things that Abby was describing. I feel like my upbringing instilled in me enough common sense that my parents did trust me to make good judgment when I needed to do it on my own. For example, going to college in Ireland. No one in my family lives in Ireland. I had never been to Ireland before I got there for school. And a decision like that, which I think was a big risk but had a great payoff, is something that, like, again, a gradual building up of common sense throughout my childhood, instilling of virtues throughout my childhood, kind of came to fruition. And so I think that in terms of discipline, I guess bringing it back to that theme, I think, you know, there are lots of theories on which kind of discipline is the best. I think whichever kind of discipline at least prepares a child to make their own decisions is probably preferable. I definitely feel like my parents gave me a lot of choices as a child. I think I mentioned that earlier. And that's something, I was a summer camp counselor for ages, and using the illusion of choice was always like our favorite thing to do at summer camp. You know, like, you have to go outside for lunch, but you can go with your counselor now or come with me in a few minutes. You know what I mean? And that sort of, I guess, parenting or discipline really benefited me growing up.
Wow, thank you.
I should add that Abby was a very unusual child, so I don't think that everyone can necessarily say the results that were achieved here are necessarily the same that you will get across the board, and I didn't with my other children necessarily. She was born 35 years old, so, you know, you'd say something to her, yeah, she would just like, yep, got it, and move on. So she had a kind of an internal maturity. The thing that I did do with Abby was to recognize that early on and say, yeah, I can let her do a lot more than I could let certain other kids. So it wasn't a magic formula. It ties back to actually what we discussed a few weeks ago about the different temperaments. And what you can do with certain temperaments just need more regulation than others do, especially early on. So, I want to reassure everybody that that's not, that's just different. She's also a second child. She's not a first child. The first child probably would have a little different, and I think to this day does have a little different impression.
Anina, what about you?
I mean, this is all amazing. It's so cool. So I guess for me, it's kind of what Mrs. Anderson was saying, like the idea of like each kid. So I'm also the oldest, and I think with me, my parents were a little stricter. But I also think what I'm very, very grateful is like they taught us what consequences are, and so nothing was said just like you can't not just do something. It's okay if you do this, this is what will happen. And also like tying into what like Bridget said, like virtues. It was so important to like establish in like I mean, for example. I am a child that is more driven by goals than the actual thing. And so in order to get me to like continue anything, it was always like, well, you know, many start, few finish. And so I was like, well, I don't want to be one of the many. So I want to be one of the few. And so I finished a lot of things because of just like, not because I wanted to, just because I thought like, I want to be one of the few. But I don't think that technique necessarily works with every kid. And so like, I am pretty sure with all three of us, I mean, you did pretty different, like also like, I mean, there's like little things, but like I was very driven on like, I don't know. It was just, I was more driven by other things where my siblings were driven. So she tried the same thing with like my younger sister and it didn't work. And so I think that's the beauty of parenting is you find how to individualize each child and find out, okay, what makes my child, you know, happy? What makes my child motivated? What makes my child, like, what's the weaknesses of my child that I need to work on? And it's beautiful. It's like, it's the most amazing job ever. And so I think that was really when it came to discipline, my parents knew what I needed. Like I needed to be in a swimming pool 20 hours a week, busy. I had no time to think about anything else. And that's what got me to have the virtues that I needed to like now continue, you know, and have a life that I can do with what I want to do and then also have a career and whatnot. So I think learning how to, discipline, but like discipline to the child, not discipline to just the masses, because I mean, it doesn't really work in my opinion. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to follow on what Anina said, especially about the individualizing things. I mean, the one thing that I kept coming back to when I was thinking over these things is that there cannot be a single answer. And I've even, you know, between siblings, looking at your different friends, I have some friends who were like angelic children and wanted to please their parents. Their parents treated them way differently than other of their siblings who had a little bit more of a rebellious streak. I know my mom that thinks that I was maybe a slightly better kid than I was, but I definitely had a rebellious streak. And I think she and my dad recognized that. Sometimes I needed a little bit more of a firm hand. But I think one important thing for discipline and like between different children is that there should always be very clear boundaries, what for what, sort of like the consequences that Anina was talking about. I remember a story about the Lund family from when you guys were like pretty young. I think my mom loves to remember this because she was like, this is one of Kathy's most brilliant parenting moments. I think it was Aviva had a piano lesson and she wasn't feeling super well and didn't want to go that day. And so Kathy was like, okay, well, here's the situation. If you skip today, you're going to, I don't know, maybe have to have a makeup class. That'll probably be this week. We have these other things going on that week. It's up to you. Do you think this is important enough? Do you think you feel ill enough to cancel the class and take that consequence? Or do you feel like it's maybe not important enough to merit that? And she thought about it. Aviva thought about it and made her decision. And she was like, you know what? I feel like not great, but I feel well enough to do it. And I'd rather not deal with the consequence down the road. So I think the consequences there were very clear. She was able to make her own decision. And it was actually like a very wise decision, a very like short term, I'd rather not do it, but long term the benefits way outweighed the cost.
Yeah, I want to do something crazy. Is this okay, Olivia? You're 12-year-old. You're a 12-year-old. Yes. Could you tell? You're going into pre-adolescence. You're going to go into a stage. Probably you're already that. I was there, and Manina, and all of us were, where things get like, because you're becoming a young adult and you're starting to have a criterion. Is anything you could say that, what is the hardest sometimes about obedience or about things that it's not fair? There's a lot of that word that we say, you know, kids said, it's not fair, mommy. How do you handle that? Could you give us a little bit of your experience?
I'm going to just start her conversation, but she's, I would say, a lot like Abby. She has a very much an internal self-discipline. So,
Yeah, but
and I
it's
tell
okay.
myself at the time,
Yeah, it's okay. You know, Olivia, it's okay if things are easy for you, but it is. Could you share us what is the hardest thing for you? Just like ask Anina and everybody, what is the hardest thing for you? And not put it in your point. Just you're growing up, you're changing. I can tell you what is the hardest thing for me. I'll tell you later. I had to listen to my husband too.
Probably dealing with siblings. I have to share a room with my younger sister that's 3.5 years younger than me, and my brother who's 1.5 years older than me. And I feel that I have to do more things with my sister, and have the same rules as my sister rather than my brother. So my brother sometimes gets to stay up later, and I feel it's not fair. But like if he gets to stay up later, he always wakes up later, and in the morning I have that more time than him, and I can get my work done earlier than my brother. He has a lot of distractions. So like I don't know. It's sometimes I feel it's not fair that he gets to play more video games for me. Sometimes like he'll be downstairs playing his fun games, and then we'll be upstairs watching some spiritual show that we don't really want to watch.
That's normal, man.
Then I find it's not fair, but I feel I keep on reminding myself that when I get older, I think I'm going to be grateful for those experiences with like, with those shows, and just if my parents are talking to us while he's downstairs playing, it'll for me better, I guess, than like if I was downstairs playing video games.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Girls, you had also, and I know in my family at least, these issues with sometimes having to do things that you didn't feel like doing, or having to deal with your siblings, right? Is it or that one sibling had? Can anyone put on that? How do you see it? What did you get back from having to put up with your siblings, or putting up with doing things that you didn't want to do? Any opinion or support, Olivia? And how do you?
Yeah, I think I can speak to this. I don't know if I mentioned yet, I'm the oldest of 9, so I have always shared a bedroom with my sister or sisters, depending on which house in our many moves. I definitely think it's worth the struggle. I actually remember moving to college, and it was the first time I had my own room, and I had trouble sleeping because there was no one else in there with me. And I felt like that was like really weird. But I'm really grateful for the relationship that I have now, especially with the older of my younger siblings, the ones that have really started to develop their personalities fully. We get along really well, and I'm really grateful for that, and I'm grateful to my parents for facilitating it. So I would say, keep up the struggle because it's worth it.
At the end, it's true. It's true. Mm-hmm. Any other comments?
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. I think a lot of right now, my siblings are some of the coolest people that I know, and I think that's objectively true. Like, I don't think that just because they're my siblings, they're really cool people to be friends with. But I had almost forgotten how difficult it was growing up with a lot of siblings. Like, I remember once, I think, telling one of my parents, like, it's not fair that Jesus had no siblings, because that's the only reason he was sinless. If he had a brother or a sister, he totally would have sinned. And our lady too. But I think a lot of those rough edges rub off just through the constant, like, having to be with each other. My siblings and I were each other's like first playmates, our most frequent playmates. And through that, and through bearing with each other and just like having to work it out, we learned to trust each other and to rely on each other. And to this day, that's one of the biggest reasons, like, we function as a unit. We're all really good friends with each other. We get so much out of our adult friendships with each other. And I don't think that would have happened if we hadn't like had to deal with being annoyed by each other. So every time you're like, oh my gosh, why do I have to go to bed earlier because of my little sister? That's the bonding from that, and even just from working out your own impatience with that, is going to build a beautiful friendship later on. I literally can't imagine my life without the friendships of my siblings. And those weren't forced on me. They just grew with us. All of us grew together.
Thank you. Anina, any comment?
I would 100% agree. Yeah, I mean, we're 3 girls, which is pretty ideal. We love each other a lot. But yeah, if it wasn't, I mean, my mom took us out of school when I was in 5th grade, I believe, when we started homeschooling. And like, we were close, but like them being 24/7 is like a lot of time together. And I remember like, we were like, wow, it was rough transition. But then after that, like, it became like, you're so used to being together that it's almost weird when you're not. And then also like sharing rooms. Yeah, the 3 of us share a room. And it was weird, yeah, going to college. It was the first time I ever had my own room too, after freshman year, because you have a roommate the first year. And it was so weird. It's like, I have all this space. Like, what's so yeah, it's very much the same experience that you guys had. But yeah, I'm incredibly grateful. And the 3 of us, we could not be more different. We're 3.5 years apart, all of us. So I'm 7 years older than the youngest. And like the youngest kid, like, we'll just go on walks and talk to each other. And it's like built-in best friend. And the 7 years doesn't make really a difference because we had the same childhood. I mean, actually, we had pretty different ones because of 7 years, but like we had the same foundation. And I'm so grateful that we had to, like, you know, those rough edges, just like spend a lot of time together. And we always joke that after we come home from college, because 2 of us are in college now, that it takes like a couple of days for us to just like get back into the rhythm. But then once we're back, it's like we never left. So yeah, it's worth it. Siblings are the best friends. And they also bring out the best in you and also the worst, but they help you be a better person, which I'm very grateful for.
Olivia, I was one of 5, and I had brothers, and I suffer a lot. 3 brothers around. I cried a lot. I used to cry outside. There were brothers love to bug you. But when I was dating and I got married, I am so grateful to my siblings because, gosh, they helped me to develop a muscle of patience, love for the sports, knowing the way men work in their teasing. I'm thinking about my brothers. I had my thing with my sister as well, because life never stops. It's just constant struggle. You're going to struggle. Right now is your sibling. Right now is sometimes comparing each other, which is not a thing that is a good idea. I always have to work with, and I keep working with the girls, to don't compare each other and to be unique. And that is something we as adults have to do all the time. We have to all the time. I have to remind myself to don't compare myself with my friend and the other friend or the family or the saint even, because I am alone. I said that before. I'm a unique person and I cannot compare with anybody else. So it's the goodest to always remind yourself that you are the only one, and whatever your parents give you, they will give you. Meaning you are yourself, and your parents should give you what you need, and what each sibling gets, it's their own needs. Nobody that you are yourself, and that you will learn through all this process, this painful process, I believe. Anyway,
thank you. I'm grateful for that. I'm the youngest of 9, and I feel like, you know, having just 3 children, I'm like, it's just so different, and I'm always trying to give her my you know, examples of it. And that's, I think, my last words all the time is like, when you leave the house, you're gonna miss them, I promise you. So that's great. Thank you so much for that feedback.
And also with something I've been thinking a lot too recently, like graduating from college and looking at the friendships that I have, it's not a situation where if you're friends with your siblings, you're not going to be friends with other people. My friendships with my siblings made my other friendships possible. There are things that you would not know, like little annoyances, little disagreements, that you wouldn't know whether or not they should make or break a friendship unless you had been through some of the same things with your siblings. So you know, okay, well, just because he chews loudly doesn't mean we can't stay friends because my little brother chews really loudly and we still talk. To bigger things like what do you need to agree on, what is not necessary to agree on, all your family relationships spread out and ripple out into your relationships in work, romance, friendships, everything like that. So it's not going to cripple you. It's only going to make you stronger in your other friendships to be friends with your siblings and to put up with them for now.
What a beautiful
Also, sorry.
No, it's such a beautiful perspective. Thank you, Abby.
As you get older, also the friends the friends that you have, your siblings' friends become your friends too very often. So, you know, that my brother's best friend is really cute kind of thing, or whatever, those little, you know, or wow, you know, that you got to get a load of my sibling, my sister's best friend's younger brother or whatever, and stuff like that. That really does change. So the relationships really kind of move around. The other thing is that I want to just say this on behalf of people who have to deal with annoying brothers. We're all like females talking on this forum right now, so we haven't really heard from the male side.
That's true.
But
That's true.
I can just tell you from my experience, raising girls and raising boys is very, very different. I don't know anybody who would deny this. But it's Olivia, just be patient with your poor mom, because I got to tell you, it's a piece of work trying to keep things fair between them, because it's just, boys will just run you ragged. And you know, it's just like girls will like kind of toe the line a little bit more easily in general, is my experience. And I don't have a lot of experience with boys, but it's a very different thing dealing with it. So, you know, if you feel like you're not exactly being treated unfairly, you know, just be patient. There will come a time when it will even itself out.
Yeah, mommy, I remember when Johnny was very little being absolutely appalled when he would just run from you when he was in trouble. Like all of us girls would just stay there and take it like a man, and he would just run and you would start laughing. And I remember being like kind of horrified and amused at the same time, and also realizing I guess it is the boy. I guess it is the fact that he's a boy that makes this so different.
It's true.
Yeah, they don't care what people think. That's the thing.
What about you, Bridget? You have how many girls? How many boys?
So we're 5 girls, 4 boys.
And it is
Pretty even.
you're very, in my opinion, and the same with you, Michelle. You guys are very rich in experience. You have a lot of personalities. You have a family life with a lot going on, and I'm sure it's a strong influence in your who you are and what you are. It's like the virtues come just with the relationship. We're human beings, and human beings are made to socialize, to be, and with our senses, and we develop virtue with the relationships. So
Absolutely. No, I just thank you. That was really beautiful. I think it's accurate. I would like to say it's accurate because it makes me sound better and Michelle sound better. No, that's a very kind statement. I think it definitely gives you a more colorful personality to have lots of relationships in your life, you know, because as you say, we are social animals. And I think whether that's through, you know, a lot of really fruitful relationships with your siblings or friends or, you know, whoever, that kind of helps shape your personality really well.
I mean, especially true for me growing up with the youngest of 9. The virtue came from not necessarily discipline from my parents. I mean, we had a lot of hard work. We worked a lot as a family. So that was our virtue, I guess. But we never had the conversation, you know, as far as discipline. So as a, you know, I think I was grateful for, you know, my siblings in that relationship to be able to be, you know, successful in life and, you know, being able to make, you know, just being able to like get through all the hard times. But as a parent, I tend to, you know, this series is so great for me because it's like it's always reminded me of things that I, you know, as parenting, but that it seems I tend to fall back to how it was for us. We do a lot of work around the house too, and you know, just I hear you all explain the why, and I'm not always I try, but I'm not always, it's not so natural to me. So this is an excellent conversation overall.
we're going to run out of time now. We have to close it. But before I close it, I have again go to Bridget because Michelle said something. There's not enough time to say why. It's true. It's true. Especially a mom of 9. I will never imagine her saying why to everybody. But I imagine, I'm not in your household, but Bridget, I imagine that the how and why comes as a general thing and some doesn't. How does it work with you guys?
I think, you know, one thing that I always say I'm really grateful for is that I never felt like I was deprived of attention. That might be because I'm the oldest, but I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way. I think something beautiful about being in a big family is that once a couple of the children understand like what their parents are doing, they can kind of help pass that down. None of us are ever alone in this house, literally. So I think whether it's our parents or our siblings explaining something to us, the why kind of gets passed down pretty clearly. And I think that's a real benefit of a lot of siblings as well.
That is so true. I was shocked actually just by practice that one day I saw one, I think my second one, running around very nervous, and I said, "Where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to practice piano." I said, "Oh, I haven't said anything." He said, "Oh, Nina told me if I don't do it, she's going to be very upset." So I was shocked about how they look up to the older sister. They were more fearful to please her than me. I mean, I didn't have to say that much. I think that it's true. You work hard with the first one, and it's like a chain reaction, right, Karen? I don't know.
Very true. Very true.
I don't know, Michelle, how you feel, but it's a beautiful what you said. It is of course every child is unique, but there is in the rules of the house. I think you hit the right key in this, Bridget. It becomes you start it up, and it goes through with all of you. You all implement it. It's true. It's true.
I think that's very true. My mom always said that when I asked her, how, as a parent, how did you have 9 of us? And she's like, you have the older ones taking care of the younger ones, and they're modeling. It's a constant two-way modeling, right? And the older ones are growing from taking care of the younger ones, and the younger ones are looking up to the older. So it's really, that's the beauty in the large family.
Yes, and it's not
Actually, there was a study about alienated teenagers, and one of the things that they came up to the brilliant solution at the end, there were 2 things in particular, and one of them was that it was much more helpful for students in high school to be associating with kids both younger and older. So they said that age segregation is one of those things that actually induces alienation. And the other thing was seminar style classrooms. So they recommended that people adopt a more seminar style classroom where the teacher leads but doesn't control the entire conversation. And I said, wow, they just invented the multi-generational family and the dining room table. Great recipe, here we go. But I thought that was really interesting that keeping kids segregated by age is actually not that healthy for them. It's really kind of discouraging. And I did find, if you find that it's hard to explain something to a kid, the other siblings will very often nail it in such a way. They'll be able to explain it in such a way that the younger kids totally get. And they're like, of course we do it this way because, that would happen if we didn't. And they may be more, their reasons may not make sense to you, but they make sense to each other. And I think kids are just more able in some cases to learn from an older sibling than they are from a parent.
It's true. It's more dimension. Oh, I love this topic. Unfortunately, we run out of time. But I tell you, this was beautiful get together. And I hope we can do it again and bring up all these topics because it's helping us all. Do you want to close it, Karen?
No, I think it's been wonderful. I'm so grateful that everybody was able to make it. This is like literally across, how many time zones have we spanned? It's like 6-hour time difference. And it's so thrilling that it kind of all fell together so nicely. So thank you guys so much for coming on. It was really very interesting to hear your perspectives. Really, really a lot to think about.
Inviting us.
And we will have the next session in discipline, and we will be in a different setup. But looking forward to the next meeting.
Thank you
so much, Kathy.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you to our for trusting us to talk about their parenting in front of them.